Welcome to the party!
Something that made Gauntlet Legends and Dark Legacy memorable was the ability to wipe out enemies with a comedically intense ability. Whether it be Wizard's Demon Skull or Warrior's Pinball Legend, there is no shortage of legendary ways to smite the forces of evil, and today, we're going to be taking a look at every single one of them. Originally, this video was intended to rank the characters according to their canonical powers, including enemies and lore-relevant figures, such as Rashad Marker. However, due to complications and some community feedback, it was clear that people wanted the video to focus on the main heroes as they are portrayed in the game. However, not only would that list be very short, but also impossible to create stat-wise. All of the classes are equally balanced, meaning any ranking would come down to personal preference, rather than something that can be measured. But while the stats are equally dispersed, their turbo abilities certainly aren't. So this is our way to talk about the familiar heroes, but actually give the list some substance beyond just our preferred playstyle. For those that really wanted to see a general hero tier list, I will place our personal rankings at the end, but the results will vary heavily from person to person. Now on to the rules. We will be ranking every turbo, half turbo, and 2-player combo, so no elemental melee combos or parries. While arcade players could argue these are technically turbo attacks, we're sticking to what Dark Legacy console determines as a turbo. We'll be judging their appearance as seen in the final PlayStation 2 build, both to provide a baseline to the version of the attack and to avoid discussing graphical errors as seen in the GameCube build. And no alternative versions of attacks will be ranked, so no double death. The range of the attack, how the attack inflicts damage, and the visual display of the turbo will affect its placement on the tier list. The exact damage of the turbo depends on a lot of factors, such as level or elemental stats, so we'll more so be focusing on how the attack delivers it. And finally, all of the turbos will be on the same tier list, but looked at with the limitations of the type of turbo. So we're not going to rank Fire Arc lower than Plasma Trail just because of the half turbo. Each will be looked at according to how it performs as the kind of turbo that it is, how it compares to other turbos of its class, and how useful it is generally speaking. Also, like our previous tier list, this template is public and can be found in the description, so if you want to rank these turbo attacks yourself, feel free to check it out. We've also linked a character tier list, so if you want to rank the heroes, bosses, and other characters from the lore, we have that as well.
Aerial Twirl!
Aerial Twirl is just so bad. This is Archer's 2-player combo. When activated, the other character rotates A1 over their head as she fires random arrows, while also providing minimal radial acid damage around them. The biggest issue is the altitude. These arrows fire straight, and since she's lifted above the other character, these arrows will fly over the heads of average-sized enemies, reserving its use for mostly mini-bosses. That alone defeats the point of a 2-player combo, but it gets worse. As mentioned, the arrows are random, and though they somewhat resemble a circle, it's not really fair to call it such. If you use this attack on a golem or boss, you're likely to land 1, maybe 2 arrows, and that's another thing. These are just normal arrows, they're not elemental. And yeah, Archer's other turbos do this, but in those cases the amount of them makes up for it, and they're in a much more optimal position to hit. You can literally just use 2 heavy ranged attacks and get the same effect as Aerial Twirl. Look! This is the only one that I recommend never using. There is nothing Aerial Twirl offers, unless you want to pretend you're playing arcade where the heavy ranged attack costs you turbo. Even on a visual level, this one is just... Most of the moves on this list, even the less impressive ones, are at least visually interesting. But she just gets picked up and moved around. It's not bad, it's just kinda underwhelming, especially considering what else Archer can do. And that's what I'll leave you with. Just use literally any of her other moves, or just have the other player use their 2-player combo. Well, unless it's a wizard.
Doppelganger!
Doppelganger is another mostly useless 2-player combo. It's certainly better than Aerial Twirl, but it also has its flaws. Doppelganger is Wizard's 2-player combo, in which Sears teleports the other player in a circle, dealing light damage in the spots they land. The biggest flaw is yet again positioning. The damage is only dealt to the spots he hits when he hits them, and he only hits each spot once. So if an enemy isn't there when it happens, it's a waste. Therefore, this is only good if you're completely surrounded. And even if you hit something on every spot, that's a lot less kills than just setting off a magic, or just using Rock Shower. It's more visually interesting than the previous one, but even so it's not amazing or anything. Like perhaps if it caused the player to appear in every spot at the same time, which would also make the name Doppelganger more appropriate, because it doesn't really clone them, just move them around really quickly. Or it could have worked as described with the Acolyte's Mirror Mirage attack, in which he temporarily creates a mirror clone of the character. But yeah, this is another one that you really just don't need to bother with.
Thunderclap.
With a massive jump in quality, I present Dwarf's Thunderclap. This one certainly isn't bad, it's just kind of vanilla. This is Dwarf's Half Turbo, in which he claps his hands, spilling lava in a circle around him. It does its job. You'll certainly be dealing fire damage to those around it, but that's it. It's just a slow clap and boom, lava. It would be better if it was a little more visually interesting, like if it was fire cracks that spawned around him instead. That's mostly what this one is lacking, it's just pretty forgettable. This is one of those turbos that I'm sure most people watching this completely forgot about unless they're a dwarf main, and that's the issue. It's just not as memorable as some of the others.
Acid Rain.
My biggest complaint with Sorceress, other than her goofy walk cycle of course, is the confusion around her elemental status, which leads me to my problems with Acid Rain. This is a light attack, not acid, so I don't know why it's called this, especially with the effects appearing more green than yellow. I guess Acid Rain sounds better than Light Rain, and it might be a reference to Legacy Twinion Town, which was an acid realm, and is why Province and Sky are pretty green in general. But it's still rather confusing. Also, this attack is like, really boring. Sorceress summons a yellow cloud effect, dealing radial damage around her. The problem is, there is no visual indicator as to the range of the attack. Most turbos have a ring, or some way to easily distinguish how far it reaches. Acid Rain doesn't have that. It's not that big a deal, especially if you use it a lot and get used to it, but at first, or if you're just testing it in the tower, it can be confusing. Finally, I find the effect to be overly simple. She spawns some neon particles, and enemies in range just die. It would be more interesting if we got to see something actually hit the bad guys, but what we got isn't the worst thing ever, just kind of boring in comparison.
Spin Kick.
So, Spin Kick has a reputation of being the worst two-player combo. I disagree. That doesn't mean I think it's particularly good, but credit where credit is due, there are some advantages to it. Spin Kick is Valkyrie's two-player combo, in which she jumps on the other player's back, uses one of her wings to create a light-based wave attack, and backflips off. The wave attack reaches 50% further than Multi-Blade Arc, but only in one direction. So under the right circumstances, it can be more optimal than just using a half turbo. Also, I find this move to be more visually interesting than some others, certainly of those I've covered so far. I do think Spin Kick is a dumb name though, especially considering that she doesn't spin nor kick, so that's a little odd. At least Ergo Twirl is a cool name. Spin Kick is probably the worst name of all the turbos, but if I'm playing as Valkyrie in multiplayer, I'll certainly go out of my way to use this a few times.
Fire Arc.
Despite its low placement, I actually like Fire Arc a good deal. While simple, I think it's a very satisfying effect. This is Warrior's half turbo, in which he swings his axe while charged with the fire element, causing radial fire damage. Stat-wise, it's the same as Thunderclap, but I find the visual significantly better. Also, I like the implications it has regarding the warrior's character. He's a Conan the Barbarian type, but is disciplined enough to conduct fire through his axe like this mid-combat, which is more impressive considering the elemental lore around the fire element. But even without that aspect, it's still a good effect. One reason it's ranked a little lower, however, is its strange hitbox. I mentioned its radial damage, which it is, as it deals damage to everything surrounding the warrior. But the forward part of the attack has more range, so it's almost a radial wave hybrid. This isn't necessarily a bad thing. In fact, it actually makes a lot of sense. It's just that no other turbo has a hitbox like this, so it's a little odd when running tests on it, and understanding the exact reach of the front's wave compared to the back. However, you can spin around during this move, which would mostly extend those range in all directions. Overall, I think Fire Arc is a simple, but solid move.
Sonic Boom.
Sonic Boom is interesting, and honestly kinda hard to talk about. This is Jester's half turbo, in which he summons these giant gloves before shattering them together, dealing radial acid damage. And I think that is my biggest issue with it. It's radial damage. Jester is a speed prime, meaning you optimally want to keep your distance from enemies. Therefore, most of the time you're just not in the optimal position to use this. It certainly has its uses, such as mini-bosses, but with general Jester combat, it's not the most optimal thing. Compare this with the double bow, Archer's half turbo, which can be effective without sacrificing her position. Typically with Sonic Boom, you'd have to go out of your way to use it against enemies, at which point, just save your progress and use a hammer time. But with that being said, there are some things about Sonic Boom that I do fancy. Like all of the Jester's abilities, it is visually phenomenal. If anyone else did this, it would be absolutely bizarre, but makes perfect sense for the Dream Major. This is certainly a Dream World trick. So, regarding personality and visuals, it's on point. It's just a practicality that mostly holds it back. If the glove fragments fired forward like projectiles, I think it would be a lot better, and work with Jester's range-focused playstyle.
Multi-blade arc.
This is a pretty good one. Valkyrie's half turbo involves her spinning around and floating up as her wings act as spinning blades, dealing lightning damage of course. Visually, this is one of my favorite attacks, but there is a downside. The range. It's radial damage, but the circle is just a bit small. I feel this attack would benefit a lot better if it just reached a little further, but overall, I think it's a pretty solid attack.
Holy crap, that's a dragon!
Ball and chain.
The ball and chain is very good. Knight swings a lightning charge flail, dealing wave damage in front of him. It's very simple, but also really satisfying, as well as just feeling right. Like, it makes perfect sense for him to have this. It might come down to the lightning visual effects in general being particularly great in this game, but ball and chain is a pretty solid attack all around. It's both simple and exaggerated, as it's realistic in comparison to stuff like Plasma Trail, but it's also comedically large. It's less satisfying in the GameCube release due to the graphical trail bugs, but that's not affecting the ranking.
Fire Fissure.
The first full turbo on the list. Fire Fissure is a pretty cool idea, but it looks odd in most places. Dwarf slams his hammer on the ground, causing a split in the earth that travels forward, dealing fire damage. Firstly, the visuals are odd. The crack doesn't move in chains like an actual split would, but rather just float forward as a solid object. Considering that all the turbos do this, it makes sense, but for this one in particular, it just looks weird, especially if it's arched upward, like used against a boss. So you have this fissure in nothing, just floating forward. I think the idea is great. A traveling fissure is a great concept. It's just the execution. I guess you can kinda blame the limitations of the era, but we've seen these guys pull off some pretty impressive effects, even in older Gauntlet revs. However, there is another problem with the Fire Fissure, the hitbox. The hitbox for this attack is a sphere at the back, so only the back part deals damage, which can make this effect look even weirder. But in a weird way, the absurdity of this ability adds to its charm. Like you're playing Dwarf for the first time, and you see this massive crack in space just wipe out everything. It certainly falls into that amazingly absurd kind of turbo. If this turbo had a larger hitbox and had a chance to deal tick damage, which we'll talk more about later, then it would be a lot higher on the list. But between the effect and the hitbox, I have to say that it's the worst full turbo overall. Certainly not a bad move, just a little whack.
Cannonball.
Cannonball, on a gameplay level, is genuinely overpowered. This is Jester's two-player combo, in which he trampolines off the other player, showering bombs, dealing crazy radial damage. While it only lasts a couple seconds, it's really cool watching everything die on the same frame. When I play multiplayer with Jester, I do this consistently as opposed to Sonic Boom, because the radius is actually crazy. There were only two real downsides to this one. Firstly, it's kind of boring visually. It's certainly not bad by any means, but this is the Jester. Chicken crates, glass gloves, punch hammer, that Jester. So compared to the rest of his abilities, Cannonball is just underwhelming visually. Secondly, this move, from at least everything we've tried, does not deal acid damage, being the only turbo attack in the whole game that doesn't deal elemental damage. But ignoring all of that, this move is really good. You'll kill most everything on the screen in only a couple seconds. If not for the concerns I addressed, I would have ranked this probably in A tier.
Spellstorm.
Sorceress's full turbo has a complete inverse issue as Fire Fisher. While Fire Fisher works okay, but looks weird, Spellstorm looks great, but doesn't perform well. Sorceress summons a light-based cloud containing a mini army of skeletons that rush forward, dealing light damage. The skeleton army is an incredible effect, but there is a massive flaw: the way it does damage. This ability can just sometimes not hit stuff. Technically speaking, a turbo is only allowed to hit an enemy once. If you launch it at a gargoyle, it's only going to deal one input of damage as it passes through. There are unintended exceptions to this, but this is a general rule. When you trigger Spellstorm, Sorceress constructs the cloud before sending it forward. The issue is, the turbo object is considered active even before the cloud is finished, meaning anything in the hitbox will be registered as having taken damage. But that goes off before the turbo actually does damage. Meaning if you use Spellstorm right in front of an enemy, like a gargoyle, the turbo will ignore it completely, because the game thinks it's already damaged it. This is a massive flaw. But even with that in mind, this is a really cool attack. If used properly, Spellstorm is a great turbo. The hitbox is generously big, the skeleton army is a great design, it's also very in character with the Sorceress as well. So if not for the hitbox bug, this would be a lot higher on the list. But we can't overlook that.
Double bow.
Even though Archer's turbos were toned down before the final PS2 release, they're still excellent. In her half turbo, Archer uses 2 bows to fire a wave of arrows forward with some minor acid radio damage as well. This move is good because it doesn't sacrifice Archer's position to be effective, which was the main problem with Sonic Boom. You can use it at a distance and hit multiple targets, or up close and deal heavy damage to a singular target. The only thing that would be a true downside is the fact that the arrows aren't elemental. I would say that if it wasn't for one major factor. These arrows are compatible with items. Any kind of projectile modifier works with this attack. Elemental amulets, reflective shot, and even super shot. The potential to unload items in a wave attack is truly spectacular. The main reason this is where it is on the list is mostly just because everything above this is either super good or has a crazy exploit. It's also not as visually stunning as some of these other attacks. While it can be with super shot or an amulet, the base move and concept is pretty simple. But it deserves this placement as the second best half turbo.
Sky Lance.
I think Skylance is a very underrated turbo. Valkyrie's full turbo is a very satisfying move if you ask me. I think the kite projectile is one of my favorite visually, even though it's just a triangle, which is probably why I like it. Between the cool sound effect and the lightning visuals that accompany it, I find it very cool that the Valkyrie can make even such a normal shape look as destructive as it does. The main downside is how fast it is. It takes less than a second for this thing to pretty much be off screen. Now, this can be a good thing, and in arcade, I'll argue that it is, but on PS2, players are invincible during turbo attacks, and the longer the attack, the more time you get to avoid damage. For most of them, it's around 1.5 seconds, but Skylance is less than 1 second, meaning if you want to use it to avoid an attack, you better time it quickly. Ignoring the fact that full turbos are typically not ideal for this in general, since it's a longer cooldown before you can use it again, but even so, this is something that all the other turbos have that this one doesn't, so I thought I should mention it. But yeah, very solid.
Plasma Trail.
Plasma Trail is amazing. The effect is so over the top and ridiculous that I can't help but marvel at it. And it's not like Fire Fisher where it's just weird over the top, but rather looks believable in the setting, if that makes any sense at all. In Warrior's Full Turbo, a massive Burning Man spirit mirrors his movements as he summons his massive, Plasma Trail to deal damage to everything in its wake. It's a faster turbo, almost as fast as Skylance, but it makes sense considering Warrior's style. The Plasma Trail graphic is really cool just on its own, but the giant quirk that spawns along with it just makes it all the better. It doesn't affect the attack, but it is visually pleasing and adds to the implied power behind it.
Hammer Time.
Jester's Full Turbo manages to hit the insane balance of being a relatively simple move, yet being the craziest thing one can expect. It's totally on brand for Jester and Gauntlet Turbos in general. Jester uses a High Strikes mallet to summon a large boxing glove that launches forward, of course dealing sub-dark acid damage. I find it really cool how Jester's attacks manage to stay mostly in line with everything else, but have its own flavor of crazy and ridiculous to go on top of it. I think that is why the Dream Set, and actually Gauntlet Dark Legacy as a whole, is so memorable to us. The personality present in every character even between sister classes. Unexpected, but certainly welcome. Knight and Valkyrie, despite both being element primes from the same bloodline with a very similar culture, are completely different individuals, and one can conclude that just from their mannerisms alone in game. And I think Hammer Time is a perfect example of something that tells us everything we need to know about the Jester, while not feeling out of place or too weird. Stat-wise, Hammer Time is about the same as Skylance or Plasma Trail, having a singular traveling hitbox, but personality-wise, I have to say it's the best of the three.
Dive Bomber.
We're now getting into the attacks that aren't just visually interesting, but borderline broken in their abilities. With Dive Bomber being our first example, the Knight's two-player combo is actually really funny. Lionel picks up the other player and throws them like a paper airplane, causing them to fly around before the Knight safely returns them to the ground. During the flight, a large lightning-based radial sphere kills pretty much everything on the screen. It's very similar to Jester's Cannonball, but has a few things that boost it. Firstly, unlike Cannonball, Dive Bomber is an elemental attack. Everything in the radius will take lightning damage. It also lasts longer, allowing extra kills from enemies that wander into the kill zone prior to the initial activation. Third, this attack is just really fun to watch. I mean, just look at this. It gets more entertaining the more you do it. And since it's also a two-player combo, both players get a good amount of XP from this.
Pinball Legend.
Here we are, Warrior's legendary pinball two-player combo. If you've never seen this move, Warrior grabs the other player and launches them like a bowling ball, which if done properly, can get hundreds of kills and lots of XP. Note if I said done properly, which is why this move isn't an S tier. Pinball Legend has a high chance to backfire. It's very easy to reflect off of a bad angle, go the wrong way, get stuck, or even collecting unwanted items for the second player. Also, even if done correctly, depending on the other class, might put them in a bad spot. Say Warrior rolls Archer or Jester. They fly through enemy lines, but when the move is done, they're far away from the Warrior, and now you have your ranged character getting swarmed because they were thrown into the middle of the battle. It's not that big a deal, especially if you have a potion or something, but it's still an inconvenience worth noting. The unpredictability with this outcome is mostly why it isn't an S. But don't get me wrong, the move is amazing, and one of the most visually satisfying events in the entire game. Can be very rewarding for both players, but I wouldn't try to calculate it into a two-player speedrunner or something of the nature. Not to mention competitive multiplayer, this move is used more to sabotage other players than it is to help them, so it can have some negative associations to the right people.
Rock Shower.
I present you the top-ranking half-turbo. Wizard's Rock Shower is a true classic. Mechanically, this move is pretty standard. Wizard causes rocks to rain around him, dealing radial light damage. One reason this move is placed so much higher than Acid Rain, other than the clearer radial ring, is the damage. Rock Shower does way more damage than it probably should. It's not as broken as Console Legends Rock Shower, which is a whole other beast, but PS2 Dark Legacy doesn't disappoint. The effect is also really cool, simple and iconic.
Demon Skull.
The Demon Skull is pretty much Spellstorm without the bugs. But even besides that, this move is awesome. The graphic alone is enough to get it at least a B tier, but everything else pushes it to the top of A. This is Wizard's full turbo, in which he summons a golden skull that deals light damage to everything in its path. Beyond the awesome effect, this move takes about 2 seconds before it actually fires, which gives the player time to re-aim the turbo. This may sound pretty insignificant, but in practice, being able to adjust after firing can be a game changer. Take Skylance for example, a turbo that pretty much fires instantly. If your angle isn't perfect, you could miss, or at least take a less optimal direction. With Demon Skull, you can be sure that you're lined up just right before that happens. Not to mention it can atone for enemy movement, and you get more buffer time, meaning more time being invincible. It doesn't have an insane exploit like some of the ones in the next tier, but it is undoubtedly a fan favorite for a reason.
Bigfoot.
Do you remember earlier when I said a turbo can only damage a target once, and I said there were a couple exceptions? Well, this is one of them. We're not actually sure how or why this happens with Sorceress' two-player combo, but it does. Sorceress enlarges the other player, in which they stomp surrounding enemies. Now this is cool just on its own, but however this attack deals damage, it bypasses the 1-tick limit. So instead of only hitting a target once, it deals full light turbo damage on every possible frame, to everything in the radius. Meaning Bigfoot can one-shot pretty much anything. Golem, Gargoyle, General, it's going down. I'm not sure how it behaves against bosses. Typically most two-player combos aren't generally ineffective against Guardians, but I've honestly never experimented with Bigfoot on them to provide a definite answer. The only drawback is the radius is rather small, especially for a two-player combo, but given that it one-shots anything in a circle, it can be excused.
Wheel of Death.
Knight's full turbo is truly an angelic spell. Lionel uses his ball and chain and launches the head into a, well, Wheel of Death, dealing intense lightning damage. This is higher than Demon Skull for a couple reasons. One, the hitbox is bigger. Wheel of Death has a crazy large range of impact. Also, I personally find the effect more satisfying than Demon Skull. Demon Skull is better modeled, but the animations of Wheel of Death in motion is more satisfying in my opinion. All of that is well and good, but why is it an S tier? Because, like Bigfoot, it can ignore the tick rule. Keyword is can, however. Wheel of Death will sometimes just completely shred an enemy, one-shotting gargoyles and dealing way more damage to a boss than it should. We're not actually sure why this happens, as it doesn't always. Most of the time it's pretty standard, but it has a chance to just be extra ridiculous. Not sure if it's the angle or the range, but it certainly happens fairly often. Even without that, it's a great ability, but that little chance to break the game is why it's up here. It's above Bigfoot because you don't need two players to do it, and I consider it more visually pleasing.
Supercharge.
Dwarf's two-player combo is Warrior's Pinball Legend without the risk factor. In other words, the greatest thing ever. Dwarf jumps on the shoulders of the other character, riding them like a horse, behind a fully controllable elemental firewall. Firstly, this is hilarious, especially considering the sound effects. Second, this does a lot of damage. It's not like Firewall Shield or even a Fire Potion. This does full turbo damage to everything it touches, so you'll take out most everything in your path. And since you can control it, you're not going to mess it up or miss. While Pinball Legend separates the characters, Supercharge keeps them together and gives both players a lot of XP. There really is no downside to this one. You can even use it to clip through walls if you have two dwarves, due to their abnormal hitboxes. If I am playing multiplayer with the dwarf, I don't even bother with Thunderclap or Firefisher. I just use this exclusively, which heavily benefits both players because it's a two-player combo. It truly is the best this game has to offer, or it would, if not for the next one.
BFG.
The BFG is truly godly. Archer's Turbo has the best perks of everything that's come before. Extended buffer time, aimable, extra projectiles, item compatible, epic visual effect, the list goes on. It would be criminal to not put this at number 1. Even the nerfed version, which is the one we're ranking, is still the best move. I guess that says more about the prototype if anything. Archer equips this massive bow gun thing and fires an acid-based rocket down the middle, with arrows accompanying it to either side. So basically, double bow with a crazy powerful rocket in the center. Like double bow, items affect the projectile arrows as usual. So yeah, you can use this with Super Shot. This also has the longest delay of any turbo, being nearly 3 seconds, which is so long that enemies will have finished blocking before the rocket is even fired, meaning you don't have to bait them beforehand. It doesn't technically deal glitch tick damage like Bigfoot or Wheel of Death, but it deals so much damage by default that it doesn't even matter. Even without an item, you can get a gargoyle to less than a quarter of health, or even kill it completely if you're in the forest realm. I don't think anyone is going to argue that anything should be placed above BFG, but I am interested in your thoughts on this list and how you would place these turbos. Check out the tier list in the description, and thanks so much for watching. For those looking forward to a tier list regarding heroes, like I said, it's extremely subjective. These are our personal rankings on the screen, and a link to another tier list can be found as well, featuring some characters. Feel free to share your opinions on characters and turbos in the comments and in our Discord. Otherwise, fare thee well, heroes.